Welcome back to Stinging Back, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on online sting operations and explore the truth behind the headlines. I'm A.
And I'm Em. Today's episode dives deep into something that's not just misunderstood, but dangerously misused. More entrapment.
In today's episode, titled Entrapment Nation, we are joined by D, someone who used to work inside the system and has since dedicated his time to exposing what really goes on behind closed doors in these online sting operations and more. D, welcome to the show.
Thanks, A&M. It's great to be here. And yeah, this is a conversation that's long overdue.
So, D, before we hit record, you said something that really stuck with us. You called entrapment a criminal defense older than the country. What did you mean by that?
Right, so we're talking 1774. There was a case involving highway robbery, and the defense argued that law enforcement induced the defendant to commit the crime. That was basically the first document instance of what we now call entrapment. Even back then, people recognized the danger of government creating crimes just to arrest someone for it.
So we've been asking the same question for centuries. Did the government set this person up just to take them down?
Exactly. And this isn't just theoretical. In the 1880s, there was a case involving a chemist who was coerced into providing chemicals for an abortion. He resisted at first, but police befriended him, wore him down, and then arrested him. The first U.S. Supreme Court case, Sorrells versus United States, 1932, established the government cannot induce a person to commit a crime they would not have otherwise committed. Classic entrapment. And it hasn't gone away.
All right, so let's say someone actually does fight back. They use entrapment as a defense, and they win. What happens? How does predisposition work also?
Game changer. It flips the spotlight onto the government's misconduct. Predisposition focus on whether the defendant was predisposed to commit the crime. The fruit of the poison tree doctrine means that all the evidence is gone. And if they were defamed, traumatized, or false betrayed, lost a job, they may even be on some grounds to sue.
So you've said before, police know the line. They know not to cross it, but they do anyway. Hey, Dee, could you elaborate a little bit more on the U.S. Supreme Court judgments?
The first U.S. Supreme Court case to recognize entrapment as a valid defense was Sorrells versus United States, 287 U.S. 435 in 1932. This case established the legal precedent for entrapment defense, which allows the defendant to argue that they were induced by law enforcement to commit a crime they would not have otherwise committed. Here's more of a detailed look. Sorrells versus United States, 1932. This landmark case involved a defendant who was charged with selling alcohol during Prohibition. The Supreme Court considered whether the government actions induced the defendant to commit the crime were illegal, and ultimately recognized entrapment as a defense. The predisposition, the case focused on whether the defendant was predisposed to commit the crime, meaning whether they would have committed the crime even without the government's involvement. This subject test of entrapment has become a key element in evaluating whether entrapment has occurred. Entrapment as a defense, Sorrell's case established that the government cannot induce a person to commit a crime that they would not have otherwise committed. And that's to the government's actions must not be coerced or overly aggressive. Wu versus Wade, United States, 1915. While Sorrells was the first U.S. Supreme Court case to explicitly address entrapment, Wu versus Wade versus United States was an early case where the federal government recognized claims of entrapment by government officers.
That's all invaluable information. Now, you've said before that police know these lines. They know not to cross them, but they do anyway. Why and what's the motivation there?
It's politics. It's about the optics and performance. If the department wants to look like they're protecting children, but they're not actually stopping real exploitation, they stage these things. It's easier. Look at this guy we caught. That's the narrative no one questions how that situation was created.
So it's not justice, it's marketing. That's chilling.
Exactly. It's a PR stunt disguised as law enforcement. The moral shield we're saving kids lets them get away with unconstitutional tactics.
So let's talk about child predator sting operations. Why is there so much fear around using the entrapment defense in those cases?
That's a good point. People confuse morality with legality. There's a moral panic. So no one wants to touch the word entrapment. But the truth is, many of these cases involve adult only spaces. People are engaged with what they believe are consenting adults. There's role play fantasies, there are experimentations, and then suddenly, boom, they're accused of targeting a minor who shouldn't even be on that site.
That's a serious disconnect. The public sees predator, but the context shows something completely different.
Let's say someone actually does fight back, uses the entrapment defense, and wins. What happens?
The game changer. It flips the spotlight onto the government's misconduct. The fruit of the poisonous tree. The doctrine means that all the evidence is gone. And if they were defamed, traumatized, or falsely portrayed, they even may have grounds to sue.
All right, let's get into the psychology of the officers. You've seen this from the inside. What's going on in their heads during these operations?
Honestly, a lot of it is ego and detachment. These officers are trained to dehumanize. They build trust with their targets, they groom them, ironically, much like they accuse the suspect of doing. They minor emotions, they act flirty, they escalate sexual conversations to hook the guy. It alienates and manipulates, pure and simple.
So these guys are being groomed by law enforcement?
Exactly. And they chosen for a reason. Lonely, socially disconnected men are easy targets. They want connections, and that's exploitation in the worst way.
We need to talk about the male loneliness. How does that factor in here?
It's massive. Men, especially young men, are facing an epidemic of loneliness. They're isolated, they're disconnected, and they're vulnerable. Sting operations know this. They target that vulnerability because it's easier to manipulate someone who's emotionally raw.
So instead of offering resources or empathy, we offer a trap. That says a lot about our priorities. People always ask us, what happened to catch a predator? Wasn't that doing God's work?
Far from it. That show got shut down after a man, in fact, the district attorney, killed himself after a sting. The misconduct in that case was so bad that the police could have been liable for some negligent homicide charges. That show didn't end because it stopped catching criminals. It ended because it caused irritable damage.
It's unbelievable.
There are lives that have been lost because of these sting operations, and that's something that people are not paying attention to. And these, some of these men could be the father of children that are losing their fathers to this for no valid reason at all. So, in my opinion, these sting operations are causing far more damage than any good that could ever come from them.
Yeah, I agree on that. People need to understand what's the incentive for police.
It's a pay to play. Departments get grant money from programs like ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children. Based on arrest numbers, more arrests mean more funding. That's why they inflate these cases. It's not about kids, it's about budget.
So the public sees heroes, but behind the scenes, it's just a quota system.
Exactly. And until people realize that, innocent lives will keep getting destroyed. So you hear the words ICAC, and it comes into the Internet Crimes Against Children. And instantly, it makes you feel good. You go, yes, these are the good guys. They're here to save children.
Right, I want children saved.
Oh, I
Me
agree.
too.
It's a scarecrow argument. I think there's not a person on this earth that don't want children safe. Our group, Cage, Stingback, we support children being safe. What we don't support is government entrapment. It's one of those programs that sounds good, but you start reading the fine lettering in that contract, you realize they are not up to good.
For sure, they are focused on in the wrong place, focused on the wrong people. Now, I have a question for Dee. Can we talk about why so many of these men are being denied the entrapment defense? I have heard many stories where lawyers have told the men that they cannot use the entrapment defense because in order to use the entrapment defense, they have to be guilty of committing the crime. They just have to prove that they committed the crime because they were induced or coerced to commit the crime. However, many of these men just never believed that this was a real minor, or they were confused, or they wanted to help this person. Oddly enough, that's something that gets used against them when they say they were trying to help this reckless teenager who was soliciting random adult male strangers online to meet for a casual sexual hookup. Um, but some of these men really did not intend to do any harm to this person who was supposedly a minor if they really thought they were a minor. And those men are not allowed to use the entrapment defense because if they are claiming innocent, they have to claim to be guilty. They cannot claim to be innocent and use the entrapment defense. So can you explain that to us?
So I think that's about a two-segment argument because basically it's both. It's I'm coerced into believing there's some type of age play going on, but on that same line, it's like law enforcement is encouraging that thought process by dissecting pictures of people that are obviously adults. Nobody wants to use the term entrapment in a defense because essentially you're pleading guilty, but you're making the argument that the government tactics were unlawful and they are the reasons why you committed the crime. Now, at first glance, you're not going to want to say I did it. It's a scarecrow argument. You try to, rape a child? Of course not. But right here, you quite obviously did. You came to the location. Very easily, they trick you into staying onto the argument of, I believe this was somebody engaging into some type of role play. The reason why they want you to is because you give them probable cause. You give them probable cause, you're not able to fruit of the poison tree their evidence. So you give them probable cause, they're able to convict you. If you go with the argument of entrapment, I was induced, you can fruit of the poison tree their whole case. If we could possibly include them engaging in the role play or the porn language techniques in order to induce these men to commit a crime, it would make the entrapment argument very strong. And the entrapment argument is what you want. Now, the second segment of this conversation is you got to understand courts run like a conveyor belt, police work like a conveyor belt. So, in police world, you have the way you do something and you do it the exact same time. I'm sure everybody listening to this conversation has been pulled over. Usually, the word out of the officer's mouth is, "Hey, how are you? License and insurance," or they'll even be nice enough to tell you why you got pulled over. Sometimes they're not. That's training. They do it each and every time without fail, so they don't forget a step. That way, while you're looking for your license, they're scoping your car. That's a trained step. Now, in these things, it works like this: entrapment, arrest, interview. So we all know about the entrapment part. We know about the arrest part, but the interview part we're not knowledgeable on. The interview part is their attempt to get the entrapment argument thrown out. I think we've all seen the Chris Hansen's episodes where he catches the person and they are immediately put on an interview. Now understand, Chris Hansen is not police. He has no place doing what he is doing. That's why he got sued. In fact, that's probably why he's been in jail for fraud. Those guys are essentially having their rights violated by a citizen, but they can't argue that in court because Chris Hansen does not work for the government. In that conversation, the person is coerced they're scared, and they're willing to say anything to get out of their situation. That's where they lose the entrapment argument. Now, also, courts are not used to entrapment arguments. You go to a district court, or, well, it's going to be a felony, so you're going to a district court or a federal court. Federal courts might be more used to it, but district courts are not. District courts are handling armed robberies, they're handling DUIs, they're handling homicides, they're handling drug charges. They bring in a sex charge where there was no real victim. Well, everybody's got to crack open the law books and see what they say. The entrapment argument is a muscle, and it doesn't get worked out enough. And that's because law enforcement generally is way too busy to be entrapping people who have no predisposition to commit a crime to commit a crime. That's why we see it so famous in these cases where someone might not go to trial until 2 years down the road. And by that time, your rights have been violated. They've already violated your right to a speedy trial. And that's simply because they don't know where to go with it. We have to start exercising the entrapment argument. Because mathematically speaking, people to commit this crime is around a 2%, and they're arresting way more than that.
So, do you think that if the courts understood or acknowledged that from the beginning it is set up to be a sexual situation because of the platform they are on, either the decoy created a profile to solicit men to respond to them for sexual purposes, or the decoy posted an ad to solicit men to respond to them for sexual purposes, or in some cases, the decoy actually responds to a man who posted an ad who made a solicitation for sexual purposes. For example, I know of one case where somebody on Whisper made a post about he listed himself as a male. He was a 30-year-old male, and he made a reference to a sexual act. Well, police responded to his ad, offering to perform the sexual act on him, and then said, and by the way, is 13 okay for you? That those two things do not go together. A 13-year-old responding to a random adult male stranger about performing a sexual act on him, that just doesn't go together. Would you say that police are promoting and encouraging the sexual abuse of minors if they're wanting for the men to believe that this truly is a minor that is offering to meet them for sexual activity?
We live in a country that is overly assessed with minor sex crimes. I don't know why we are that way, but we are set dead in that way. What the police is doing in these stings, where they're going to adult apps and looking for pedophiles, is it's flawed. It's fundamentally flawed. You are basically setting the basis for an entrapment argument. That person went out of their way to not talk to minors. You don't go to a bar to find a minor. You go to a bar to drink and talk with other adults. It's fundamentally flawed, and they use men's sexual preferences or kinks or fetishes in order to them to commit this crime.
I personally find it disturbing that our government is intentionally trying to put in the minds of these men who are out there seeking consensual casual sexual encounters with consensual adults, and they are intentionally targeting those men and putting in their minds, hey, you should do this with a minor instead, because we've created this imaginary minor who just really wants to do this with you. I personally find that to be very disturbing because they're supposed to be preventing the sexual, child abuse. And to me, that really comes across as they're promoting it. Unless you are role playing and this is age play, please, I want to pretend like I'm this deviant little 13-year-old naughty girl who wants to do this with an, adult man, a random adult male stranger that I just met online. In that case, it would be fine because that's, two consensual adults who are role playing. But these decoys, these vigilante groups, and these law enforcement officers are telling us that they want the men to believe that these are real 13, 14, and 15-year-olds who are offering sex to random strangers online. And they've never put out any public information or education about teenagers doing this online. And to me, that is very concerning. And isn't it entrapment just because of the nature of this was a sexual situation from the beginning? And police came in, they interjected themselves into that sexual situation and suggested and encouraged to those men basically do this with a minor instead of with a consensual adult like you were obviously looking for. And even if those men say, okay, yes, I don't care how old you are, isn't that entrapment? Because it is police who introduced the illegal behavior. Those men were not looking for illegal behavior. Am I wrong when I say it that way?
No, you're not. I've read the ICAC standards and training. I've read their manual, and I have never seen a police manual that actively encourages entrapment. I have never in my life seen it until then. I was horrified. It talks about men who go to these type of stings, watching porn several times a day, being family men. Um, it shows them almost in the light of these are just normal guys who are just lonely, and we're going to go target them.
I thought they were just normal men being normal men. Isn't
Yeah,
just this what men do?
it's like, hey guys, we can coerce men into doing things by sex. Did y'all know that?
I think men are being demonized for being men because you men are more likely to actively seek out sex, and you are more likely to seek out sex with strangers then I guess, I mean, women do it too, but men are more likely to do it. And I feel like men are being demonized for that. It's like the opposite. It used to be that women were demonized for, being sexual. You're not supposed to have sex until you're married or unless you're in a serious relationship. You're not supposed to have multiple sexual partners. Otherwise, you are, not a decent woman. You are the W word. I don't know
Yeah.
if I could say it on here, but you know which word I'm talking about. It
I
used to
think
be that.
you're already setting the record for the beeps, most beeps in an episode.
I am so sorry, but you guys know which word I'm talking about. So women were called that for being, sexual or sexually open or sexually expressing ourselves. And now we've gone to, oh, how dare you slut shame me? But men are predators now if you are openly sexually expressing yourself and seeking sexual encounters. And now even worse, men are child predators because if you're seeking sex with strangers, then you're a deviant who must be someone who will do this with anybody, therefore you must want to do it with children as well. And that's just very disturbing to see that these people, that's the mentality they have. It's no different than when they were demonizing gay men. Because you're gay, that must mean that you are a child predator.
Oh yeah.
It's the same thing.
In fact, there was a case where that occurred where they were trying to target gay men into having sex with minors. And I believe it was 7 years once those cases got resolved, whether they were found entrapped, innocent, whatever the case is. One of them came back some years later and he sued that police department for the violation of the Federal Equal Protection Act because simply they cannot target you off your sex, religion, or gender.
I can totally see that happening with these cases eventually. It's just that we're not there yet because people don't understand enough about it yet. And that's why we're doing this now.
Well,
Right.
I believe we're stepping in the right direction, whether they're just kind of beating around the bush or not. For example, um, was it Section 230, the Communication Decency Act, 1996, is getting repealed?
Right.
Yes.
And when you first read that, you have to verify your age before you go to an adult platform, which that's already in place. But it's kind of soft where you just check a box. I'm kind of hoping this goes into more of what's your date of birth. Let me see your license. Let me see your ID. Let me see your, whatever ID you have on hand that proves you're an adult.
Right. And Utah is the first state to start doing that.
Okay. I know Alabama started a version of it where you cannot go to adult porn sites without showing a ID, whether that's your driver's license or a non-driver identification card for some of us that have suspended or revoked licenses.
Right. Yeah. Utah has gone a step further to where it's Apple and Google Play. They
Mm-hmm.
have to get the identification there before any apps can be downloaded. So proof that they are over 18 at the Play Store.
And really and simply, um, to me, that's a win because they're acknowledging that adult apps are for adults instead of just being the bigger person in the room and opening themselves up for years of civil litigation and lawsuits. They're saying let's simplify it. Let's put this bridge in there. It helps both parties, you know. But in the day, you don't have minors going on to adult websites looking for sex for adults. You don't. I mean, it's a very small amount. It's basically I'm looking for milk at a lumber store. I'm sure somewhere in the United States there is a store that sells lumber and sells milk too, but it's highly unlikely you're going to find it there. I, if a pedophile actually went to an adult website looking for children, I think he'd look around for a few minutes and go, ugh, everybody's expired.
Right now.
Exactly. And online, it's even harder because a real minor is not likely to identify themselves as a minor in an adult space after they have snuck in by pretending to be an adult. So it's just not even realistic.
No, and you don't go to Pornhub and see a video in there that says stepsister stuck in the washing machine and go, oh God, no,
Yeah.
this is a crime. It's a totally inappropriate place to do a thing like that. I think that's why when you look up in the ICAC standards, it say the men that commit this crime watch porn like 3 times a day, because you're kind of in that mindset that if I go to an adult place, I'm going to find role play, I'm going to find fetishes, I'm going to find kinks. Doesn't mean that it's real. I mean, unless I see you and you are an actual child, or you can verify that, it's not going to happen.
Well, imagine working for law enforcement and getting to spend all day on these adult sex websites and getting paid for it.
Oh,
I almost think that's why they do it.
that's a gravy train. There's actually been there's been law enforcement that has done out on phone warrants. There was a case, I can't remember in which state, and out of respect for that officer, I think I'm probably gonna not give any names or specifics to it. But she was a female officer, and she was accused of leaving her child with some type of sex offender, and there was no probable cause for this case, none. And they ended up taking her child from her and putting her somewhere else and giving this person a whole arrest charge interview, all that stuff. And then they went through her phone and they found some nudes of herself that she took of herself, like any adult can do, no shame in it. If you got someone you're talking to and you have a sexual relationship and you want to exchange photos with somebody who is consenting, that's fine. But what ended up happening is she didn't get charged. I'm sorry, she got charged, but there was no evidence to convict her. And um, the cases got dropped, and the nudes that were covered from the phone warrant got shown to a lot of officers that were in the department. So she ended up suing that police department for that and for malicious prosecution, because end of the day, if you do not have evidence and you are building a case on me, you have no probable cause. Why are we here? Why are you charging me? And I think that's, a really good piggyback on why the entrapment argument is so powerful. Is it basically says you have no evidence, you have no probable cause. I had no predisposition.
Well, anybody on an adult sex website was definitely not there to find children. So I think does that not cover the predisposition part that, they were not looking for minors? If they were looking to exploit minors, they would be in the wrong place for that. They should be on platforms where they can find children, not in the adult places. So I still don't understand why any court is still confused about that, but that's something we can get to later and discuss more in detail.
Right. I think Lady Justice Myth blog we've mentioned before, I think she has some of the statistics on her page for some of this.
Yes, she has a lot of really useful information. For anybody that wants further information about this, you can visit ladijusticemyth.blog for more information about these sting operations, and she provides a lot more details.
Right. This has been a powerful episode. Dee, thank you much for sharing your knowledge and breaking down this complex issue.
Yes, sir. Happy to do it.
If this episode moved you or made you think, share it. These things aren't just headlines, they're people's lives, and we'll keep exposing the truth one story at a time because the truth matters.
Don't forget to check out Lady Justice Myth blog for deep dives and analysis on entrapment cases, and subscribe to our friend Norm's YouTube channel, ICAC Unpacked, where he breaks down real sting operations and exposes what's really going on behind the scenes.
You've been listening to Stinging Back. Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, and never stop asking questions.